Welcome everybody to Life First Conversations. Thanks, Sung, for being here with me today. I've been really looking forward to this. I think the last time you and I spoke was early fall last year. We connected over LinkedIn, and I think we had like maybe 30, 45 minutes scheduled to chat, maybe even an hour. And then we went well past the hour. And I kind of had to say, you know what, let's just stop because we're getting into a lot of cool stuff. And would you be interested in coming on and speaking about this? And you said yes, and I was really happy about that. So I'm glad to finally see this happen.
It's great to be here, Miguel. Thanks for inviting me. Just the theme of life first conversations. I applaud you for doing it. And I think it's got such a deep message that I think resonates with everyone, but is not always top of mind. And so it's a real honor to be here. And I just love having a conversation with you.
Yeah. Absolutely. And we'll definitely get into it. And so for those of you who, if this is your first time in Live First Conversations, a little bit about what this is about. I typically don't refer to it as a podcast. I refer to it as a limited series. And the idea is these are real conversations with real people talking about things that matter most, not just to them, but things that we can all relate to. There's usually a connection to finance. There may be a connection to business. My background is I'm a certified financial planner, senior wealth advisor. I'm also the head of our financial planning department for legacy wealth management. So while those things are important, numbers are important, economics is important, but so are relationships, right? So are the small little moments that we sometimes overlook. So is our faith, right? There's so many other things that move us as human beings, and it's not always the dollars, right? Those are important, but what's really important is what we're here to talk about. So again, thank you for sharing the space with me. Let's start with a little bit about your background. I know a lot of people watching kind of know who you are already just based on their connection with you on LinkedIn. But tell us a little bit about you, your background. Obviously, the big thing is leading up to this book and writing that. But before we get to all that and what leadernomics really means, let's talk about you and kind of how it all started.
Sure. So for the better part of 25 years, I worked for this big company. You may have heard of it. It's called the United States Air Force. And I like to sometimes tell it in that way because I think people forget that it's a big entity. 330,000 active duty members. That's not including the Guard and the Reserve. And so it's this huge entity, just one of what
Relatively
we would
large budget.
consider, yeah, huge entity, huge budget, huge number of people and assets. And for 25 years, I was pretty much what I could consider myself a CFO with body armor. And that's because wherever I would go, in particular, if I deployed, I'd be wearing body armor. But my job basically consisted of being a financial manager, financial analyst, and economic analyst for the Air Force wherever I went. And that often meant being kind of like the controller or the CFO for organizations. So did that for 25 years, moved around 14 different locations, 3 overseas locations, Germany, Japan, and Korea, along with 2 deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq. Then in 2017, after I had come back from a deployment to Afghanistan, had a couple of teenage kids and looked at my wife and she had that look. And so I said, honey, when you think it's time, you let me know. And she said, it's time. And so I retired from the Air Force in 2017. We moved out to the Bay Area
Thank you
in
for your
San
service.
Francisco. Yep. Thank you. Absolutely. And then I moved out to the Bay Area in San Francisco. And then I got involved with some humanitarian type work with both people and communities in Spain and then also in Ukraine. And then in 2021, shortly after the pandemic,
Hmm.
after a number of different requests, finally decided to put pen to paper, write the book that I had been speaking on for the better part of over 20 years, and then completed the book this past fall, and then now have been getting out on the street and telling people about Leadernomics. Hmm.
But this is something that's been with you for years, right? You didn't just wake up in 2021 and decide to write a book about some ideas you've had. You've been lecturing about this. You've had this has been part of your life for a long time. How did that start though? Like, was there a moment where you kind of that you can kind of point back to in your life where you can say like there's there's something here. Maybe you didn't call it Leadernomics back then, or maybe you did, but can you pinpoint it back to something?
I think for me in economics, we have a special relationship. And part of it goes back to being my first experience in the military. I went to a military service academy called the Air Force Academy. And I wasn't one of those kids that grew up in a family of military heritage. I didn't have parents and grandparents that were in the United States military. We were immigrants from Korea. My parents immigrated shortly after the Korean War. And my dad was a big fan of the United States military because of what he remembered when he was a refugee in South Korea, and just recognizing the amount of humanitarian support that was being provided by the American GI. And so he always had a fondness for the military in his heart. And then when it came time for me to finally graduate high school and consider going off to a college somewhere, at that season of my life, I was a gymnast and I didn't really care a ton about school in my future. The only thing I cared about at that season of my life was doing more gymnastics at the collegiate level. And so I had a gymnastics coach who sent off a video clip to the three service academies, West Point, Naval Academy, and the Air Force Academy. Thought I would be a good fit there. And all three schools had a Division I men's gymnastics team. And sure enough, the first one to reach out was the Air Force Academy. And it also happened to be that season of life when Top Gun had just concluded its first. Yeah. So just the allure of flying, being the next Maverick, going to this school called the Air Force Academy. It was all kind of there. And when I went to go visit it, it was pretty stunning. It was in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains in Colorado Springs. And
Must be
so
beautiful.
I got accepted. It's beautiful. I got accepted, and a suburban Chicago kid. Next thing I knew, I'm at the Air Force Academy and being brought into this military world. I thought, what have I done? What am I doing here? What have I got myself into? And most of the people that I was surrounded by, not only in the way of leaders, but also fellow students, the vast majority of them had wanted to be there since they were a young child, either because they always wanted to fly or because they had a relative that had time in the Air Force or in the military. And so as I'm going down this path of what have I gotten myself into, I'm surrounded by people that know exactly why they're there
Mm.
and why they're pursuing what they're pursuing. So I had a pretty significant crisis as an 18-year-old as to what do I want to do in life, and do I really want to be here? Because it's 4 years at the academy and then a minimum commitment of 5 years on active duty. So here I am as an 18-year-old making pretty much a 9-year decision, and it's into a culture that I was completely unfamiliar with.
Mm.
And so I needed mentorship, but my parents were pretty thrilled that I was there. So they were going to give me their subjective advice. And then everyone at the school was going to give me their subjective advice. And I needed some objective guidance in this midst of this life crisis. And would you believe that objective guidance came from a class called Econ 101?
Hmm.
And so as the class started unfolding its principles, I found it amazing that every principle seemed to be like this mirror reflecting back to me questions about my preferences, my motives, my incentives, my values, my priorities. And I thought, how does a discipline like economics do this? How is it probing my subjective heart and then giving me some objective guidance going forward? And sure enough, Miguel, I really kind of relied on this framework of economics to help guide my decisions about whether I should stay or whether I should go, whether I should remain at the Air Force Academy or whether I should go do something else in life. And would you believe, through this thought process of economics, costs and benefits,
Mhm.
I ended up leaving for a year, took a gap year, and then sure enough, economics in its very astute way, in that year that I was gone, it had a way of also then guiding me back into the military. And so ever since then, for me, it's been this personal relationship with economics as a mentor in my decision making in life and in leadership. Fast forward now about 8 years, and the Air Force calls on me to come back to the academy and to be now a teacher of economics at the academy.
Mhm.
And I'm teaching the standard textbook, Econ 101, and I've got cadets falling asleep in class. And I thought, how could you be falling asleep? This is like the greatest discipline known to man, and you guys are falling asleep. And they're
Says
falling.
the guy who views economics as a mentor.
Yeah, exactly, right? And I'm like, you guys are going to be the future military leaders in our world, and you guys are falling asleep to my mentor. How can you do this? But it makes sense because when you peel back the textbook, introduces economics in the way of graphs and math and equations. And when
That's how
you're
we all think
teaching,
about it, right? We all
that's
think about
exactly. And so when you're 18, 19 years old and you're on 5 hours of sleep and you're getting introduced to a discipline through graphs, math, and equations, yeah, the head's going to start nodding off. And so I was doing my duty teaching the textbook. There's a fire siren out here somewhere. So I'm doing my job, trying to do it the best I can, but I'm losing my students because they're just getting bogged down by the graphs and the math. And then 9/11 happens.
Mm.
And I go from instructing a joyful, youthful, exuberant group of college students who all of a sudden now are confronting an unknown, uncertain, chaotic world that they're about to enter into post 9/11.
In the
And
military, no less.
in the military, no less, correct. And so their demeanor literally changed overnight. And as I walked into the classroom, it was without a doubt that the standard text wasn't going to reach their minds, let alone their hearts. And so I pivoted and I got permission and I decided at that point that I would teach economics purely from anecdotal memoir story form. They would get the principles, but they would hear it through the lens of storytelling. And there was born Leadernomics. Post 9/11, they needed to understand the heart and the soul and the human endeavor of economics, not get bogged down at the threshold by math, graphs, and equations. They needed to walk through and see economics for what it's truly intended to be. And so that was the beginnings of Leadernomics. And that's how I've been teaching it ever since.
That's awesome. So let's fast forward a bit. I mean, let's talk about kind of what is Leadernomics. I mean, and the way I kind of understand it, but I want to have you explain it is when I'll just say this, it can be applied in almost everything. Most importantly, the way I understand it is having it applied not just in the traditional or conventional things that we would think about, like business or finance, but applying it in our relationships. But what is leaderonomics to you?
So two things. One, like I said, economics at its core, it's a human endeavor. It's always been a human endeavor. I think people will view it in many different ways as a geopolitical endeavor. They may even view it as a business endeavor. They may view it solely from the standpoint of market analysis. But ultimately, economics at its core, by definition, is the study of human decisions amidst scarcity. And that's a very important core definition because it's not only human decisions, but it's a discipline that is studying how humans make decisions amidst scarcity. And scarcity is a human universal reality, right? It's something that we all deal with. And so how do humans make choices in those conditions? So when you think about economics as a human endeavor, then you think about leadership. Leadership is all about making sound decisions, making good choices for yourself and for your people. And so the two actually blend very closely together. How can you as a leader make sound decisions for you and your people and for your company, your team, your organization without an understanding of the discipline that actually studies human decisions? And it doesn't just study human decisions, it studies human decisions when times are tough, when you're dealing with challenges, obstacles, scarcity, not having enough, making tough trade-offs. And so the two go hand in hand. And so the book is written from an understanding of how can economics provide a single framework through its principles? How can it provide a single framework so that as a leader, whether it's at work or at home or in your community, can you have a single framework by which you can see through the confusion, the chaos, the uncertainty, and get to a place of linearity so you can move forward.
And are we talking about objectivity here or
Yeah. Yeah. So we're talking about a discipline that, because it's a human endeavor, it's a discipline that can subjectively probe you and I, where we're at, separately from Miguel, separately for Seung, but then it can universally, objectively guide us both forward through its principles. One other simple way I like to typically put it to people is the thought leader space is leadership in general. It's saturated, right? There's no end to the number of books that you can find that start with 25 essentials, 20 habits, 15 principles, 10 lessons, 7 must have. I mean, the number of tools for what we call your leadership toolkit, it's endless. And the thing is that there's really nothing new under the sun when it comes to leadership principles. They've already been delved into. But what I like to say is that how often do you get to hear about a framework that's not a bunch more tools for your toolkit? It's actually the tool bag itself. And so that's the way I like to present Leadernomics, is that if you get this framework of the principles of economics in your leadership, it's the bag itself. And then when you read anything or come across anything that is 20 this, 15 that, 10 this, 7 that, you know where to put it into your tool bag. One principle is this notion of sunk cost.
Mhm.
And sunk cost is all about stop throwing more good after bad, right? And the bad isn't bad in the way of ethically or morally. It's bad in the way of it doesn't come back to you. So all of us in the course of doing life, it's what I call the cost of doing business in life. You will have to expend something to get something. But in life, there are many times we expend, and whether we get something back or not, we cannot get a refund. We cannot get a credit. Once it's gone, it's gone. You and I, we choose a school, we pay tuition. There is no guarantee we're going to learn. There's no guarantee we're going to get a job. And so I cannot go back to Harvard and say, Harvard, I just paid $80,000 a year for the last 4 years and I can't get a job. Can I get a refund? It's a sunk cost. It doesn't come back. And so the thing about sunk cost is a lot of times in life, we make the next decision, but we can't forget about that sunk cost. We keep thinking about all of that money, time, energy, emotions that we invested that isn't going to come back, that's non-refundable, but we seem to resurrect it and bring it back into our decision equation when we shouldn't. And when we do that, it affects the next decision we make. So very simply, one of the things that I see all of the time on LinkedIn is I see people pivoting and people not pivoting. I see people that are doing things in life and they realize, I've got to stop. It's not what I really want to do, but I've been doing it and I'm continuously doing it because I can't get my mind off of the fact that I've been doing it for so long. I've invested so much and surely I can't bury that. I need to keep thinking about it as I make the next decision. And so they don't pivot. They continue in something that they might be quite miserable in, right? But then you see people that are like, nope, I'm burying it. It's done. It's sunk. I'm going to pivot in life, right? So think about the countless number of leadership principles that talk about putting that aside, putting it off, burying it, pivoting, going to the next decision, moving forward. All of the principles that would convey to you that this is a good decision, it all comes under the principle of sunk cost. And if you don't do it, then you're entering into what's called sunk cost fallacy. So that's one example. One other example, and there's
some people could also refer to that as a definition of insanity, right? Continuing to do the same thing over and over again. Yeah.
absolutely. And it stems from this notion of loss aversion, right? Where you are so averse to the loss that you can't bury the loss. You are constantly resurrecting the loss in your decisions going forward. Addiction, gambling, long-term relationships that are toxic that you just won't end, right? Those are all have elements of sunk cost in it when you can't bury it. So again, tons of principles that
Issues
revolve
here.
around sunk
Second.
cost, but that is one aspect of Leadernomics. Another one that I often like to talk about is diminishing returns. And that is as basic as the fact that anybody who does anything for too much or too long is going to experience some level, some rate of diminishing satisfaction with that entity, right? It's human nature. And how often do we talk about leaders needing to invoke this idea of rest, replenishment, switching from one thing to another to be energized, right? Those are all areas of leadership and of life that fall under this principle called diminishing returns.
Mm.
And diminishing returns is probably the number one principle that I talk to people about when they're experiencing burnout or when they're experiencing this anxiety that comes from comparing. Because the thing about diminishing returns is everybody experiences it universally, but everybody follows a different rate. So I used to tell my college students, you're all going to experience diminishing returns when you consume alcohol. Some of you will experience it after the first drink. Some of you
Mhm.
will experience it after the fifth drink.
Mhm.
But if you're looking and hanging out with friends that are experiencing it on the seventh drink, but you're one that experiences it on the third drink, you better not be comparing, right? Because the minute you compare, you think that you should be keeping up at the rate that they are. But that's not how diminishing returns works, right?
Yeah.
We all have different rates by which we accelerate and by which we diminish. And
Yeah.
so it's the number one principle I point people to when they get into this anxiety mode, and it often stems from comparing with other people, right?
Right.
Diminishing returns would say, stop comparing. Don't compare. Be self aware, right? So that's, again, these are the principles that so many leadership lessons and teachings, they all fall under these economic categories. And once you get Leadernomics as your tool bag, then pretty much all of the leadership lessons are going to fit somewhere in there, and you'll know how to categorize it.
So how does this fit? One of the things I see pretty often in the business owner world, right? I work with a lot of founders, people who've built businesses, and the stories are usually very similar. The idea is they want to start a business, develop some sort of personal wealth for themselves, personal freedom, more freedom of time. They want to be able to do the things that they really enjoy, the things that they really matter. Fast forward a couple of years, the business becomes more successful. Next thing you know, they have an army of employees, they have HR, they have payroll, they have bookkeeping, they have taxes, they have, all these different problems that they never dealt with before. Cash flow hopefully is good. They're successful in the sense on paper, right? They're making more money, right? They bought the bigger house. They're living the life that they wanted on paper. But if they have a family and they have kids, most often there's a kind of a notion of, the family is kind of paying the price of that business owner, working so hard on that business to continue to be successful. And at some point, everybody kind of reaches the same point of whether they're asking themselves the actual question or just feeling it. There's this notion or feeling or sense of questioning of, is this enough? Is this worth it all? Right? What is this all for? I can relate to so much of what you said in the beginning. You joined an industry, the military. You felt like you were kind of lost. You didn't know why you needed to be there, and you felt like everybody else around you did. You had to make a multi-year, I think you said 9-year commitment into a culture that was very unfamiliar to you. And I can relate to that in the sense that the wealth management culture was very unfamiliar to me. I felt like every other advisor around me when I started back in 2012 knew exactly why they were in the business. In fact, they went to college and they studied whether it's economics or finance. Studied something different, and I had to kind of find my own path, find my own mentors. But for these business owners that are kind of grappling with this problem and this question, the problem being, I'm successful, and yet what is this all for, right? How does Leadernomics apply to them?
That's such an important area of thought that I'll give you two thoughts on this. One, this is where I come back to this notion of scarcity, which I think it's given kind of a rough label, I think, over the last decade or so. People hear the word scarcity and they immediately think limitation. And I've been one to always say the beauty of economics teaching us scarcity being something that's universal for every human is that scarcity isn't a limitation. Scarcity is what I call the abundant guide. And the reason is because it's not until you recognize that you don't have all of the time that you want. You will never have all of the resources that you want. You will never have all of the things that you want. And so the question becomes, what are the most important things? If I can't have everything, then at least can I have what's most important? And so scarcity to me is the very first realization and question that any person should really consider from the standpoint of this notion of understanding limitations not be a negative thing, but be the positive thing that makes me consider, what are my values? What are my non negotiables? What are the priorities? What are the life first things that mean most to me, right? Because I don't have time for everything. I don't have money for everything. So I better think about what's the most important things, right? So that's one aspect of, I think, leadernomics and economics in general that should really challenge every person is through this universal understanding of scarcity, it ought to drive you to this place of what's most important for me and in
So
my
to
life.
recap, that's basically understanding that there's a finite amount. In this case, we're talking almost about time or attention. Let's just say there's a finite amount of a finite amount of our time, and there's a scarcity of that, right? And so by prioritizing what are the most important things or people to me, that is using that notion of scarcity. I never thought of it that way. It almost kind of feels reverse thinking of it that way, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, even like, I mean, I'll get as elementary as stomach space. The capacity of my stomach space is limited. And so if I'm going to fill it, I can either fill it with random arbitrary things that will definitely fill it, or I can fill it with what I believe are the most important things, the best things. And so because I can't fill it with everything, it's got a limited capacity. It's scarce. My stomach space is scarce. And so those are like just basic things where I believe scarcity is a constant reminder of, what do you value? What are your priorities? What do you most want to invest your time, energy, emotions that bring life first to you? And can you redirect your decisions in that manner? The second thing that I would say for the people that, are in that season of accumulating wealth and expending their time, money, energy, resources to do those sort of things. I will never poo poo wealth, because wealth derivation and wealth as an incentive leads to amazing things in life and in the market. But what I will say is this: there is a very basic principle in economics known as the time value of money. I like to call it the time value of anything. Whatever it is that you are investing, whether it be the time value of money, the time value of your education, time value of relationships, the longer runway you give that investment, the greater potential you have for exponential growth and returns. So if you take the person that is devoting their life, their time, and their energy for the building of wealth so that one day they can then invest into their family relationships, they can invest into their hobbies, they can invest into their leisure, they can invest into all the other things that they will hope one day that they will invest into, because they've reached that point where they feel satisfied and comfortable in their wealth levels. I would say this: I will say that maybe monetarily you have created a runway for exponential growth, but I would ask, where will your family be? Where will your relationships be when you're now in your late 30s, early 40s, in your 50s, and you haven't thought through the time value invested in those areas? What will be the runway for exponential growth that you will get to experience in those things in life that you said one day that you will invest in? So one day you will. But I will also tell you that your time remaining to enjoy and to experience the exponential growth of those things are now quite limited. And so I think that's a very important, I always like to talk about generosity. But yeah, once I get to this place, I will be way more generous, because now I'll have all of these resources. And I would say that your ability to exponentially grow in the realm of generosity, if it doesn't start early in life, I will question to what extent you think you will have exponential ability down the road
Yeah.
because you haven't invested in it from the beginning.
Yeah. This reminds me, actually, there's a movie called with George Clooney that came out recently on Netflix called Jay Kelly. Have you seen this movie?
I think I've seen the trailer. I haven't seen the entirety of the movie, but I've seen the trailer.
For anybody watching, this is a great movie, and I think kind of speaks to what you're just talking about, right? Where your time is invested, and the synopsis of the movie, basically, at least the connection that I'm making here is George Clooney plays this role of a movie star, and he devotes his entire life to being this movie star. People love him for it, almost the same way people love George Clooney. But in this particular movie, nobody knows anything about his personal life. He has children, but he prioritized his career in the movie industry over family. Had a divorce, wasn't there for the kids. Fast forward to him now retiring from the movie industry, and he's feeling the sense of just loneliness, and he's reaching out to his kids, uh, you know, wanting to reconnect, wanting to now suddenly be there for them. But they've moved on. They're adults. They've grown up. And when he's calling on them for them to be there for him, how can he expect that suddenly oh, my dad's now available. I'm 30 something years old, and my dad now wants my time. It's to your point, a time value, right? Of things. Had he initiated those relationships much earlier, that would have been a completely different story. But how many people can't relate to that? How many people, I mean, that's a movie star, but replace movie star with business owner or with, I don't know, university president or whatever it is, and you often kind of get the same thing.
Yeah. Miguel, I'm gonna have to watch the movie now because now you've got me hooked, and it sounds like a very apt description of time value of anything. But it's exactly that notion of questioning, hopefully early in life, right? So it's the same person that says, "Hey, I'm 60, but I'm thinking about going to med school." And I'd say, "Well, that's wonderful. You want to go to med school at the age of 60, but like med school's 4 years, and then residency is going to be another 3 to 4, 5, 7, depending on your specialty. And so that means you'll be like 70 something by the time you're ready to practice. And your return on investment is going to be nowhere near the runway of exponential growth that would recoup the amount of years that you're going to invest because now you want to go to med school at the age of 60. It's a silly example, but my point being, it's important. And I love to mentor college students, high school students, young adults who are entering their professional lives, and conversations like Life First. It's so important to challenge people. Think about the big things early, right? Allow scarcity to challenge your value system and your priorities early in life. Because if it can guide you and direct you to invest the time value exponential growth mindset into the things that matter most with foresight, you will be incredibly thankful down the road. Health. I will invest in my fitness, in my health one day. Well, I'll tell you, some things don't only not have runway for exponential growth, but some things, doors actually even close. So this Jay Kelly character you're talking about, he may have actually in his finally this realization of I want to have a relationship with my kids, and that window has gone. It's past. It's wonderful, and I would never say to someone it's never too late, but sometimes it can be too late. Health is one of those areas. Relationships can be one of those areas. And so if those are important to you, recognize that early in your life. Invest in it so that 10, 20, 13, 14, 30 years from now, you're enjoying the exponential growth of what you invested into your health, of what you invested into your relationships, rather than dealing with no growth down the road, right? And
Mhm.
so those are two areas that I really like to challenge people on is the notion of scarcity and then the notion of time value to appreciate and to enjoy exponential growth in the areas that you have early in life discovered as your priorities.
How do you apply Leadernomics, for somebody who's really trying to, let's say there is somebody who's saying like, okay, I've identified what's important to me. It's my family, it's my health. I want to make sure that I live a long life. I'm dedicating time to my kids and my spouse. I'm home. I'm attending all the events and all that stuff. But to do that, I need to make sure that I'm still successful and I'm still bringing in the revenue. And I, by the way, need to make time to exercise. And then I also need to make time to if I want to live a long, healthy life, relationships are important. So I need to make time for my relationships. How do you apply Leadernomics when you have all these domains in our life, right? What they call overall wellness or well-being. It's because it's not just health, it's mental health, it's physical health, it's our relationships, it's how our financial status is doing, it's our family, it's love, all of those things. For somebody who is wanting to improve every single one of those areas, I often think of it almost kind of like when somebody has a bunch of debt and they have like multiple different types of forms of debt, like credit card debt, they have a mortgage, they have auto loans, they have, maybe they bought some solar and they have like one of those 18-month zero interest programs, right? So they have all kinds of debt and they're trying to all pay them off at once and they're just dumping tons of money towards each of them as opposed to saying, I'm going to focus on just one. Mathematically speaking, we can pay it off much faster if we focus on just one of those debts, right? Or focus on the one with the highest interest rate, whatever. There's different strategies. But when we're talking about life and focusing on various things that are really important, and we have a finite amount of time and resources, how do we then apply Leadernomics then? Is it really just about prioritizing, choosing, or is it different than, is my analogy a little different?
No, I think it's a very important area to wrestle with, and it's a reality, right? So I am not one to say that, oh yeah, balance always, always balance. I don't think life works that way. I think life is constantly throwing us non-linear curveballs that are going to take us off the balance of linearity. That's just the way life is. That's why life is actually a roller coaster, ups and downs, peaks and valleys. And, if you talk to anybody that are starting off in their young career, they're going to have to work a lot. It's just the nature of that season of life. I am not going to go to a group of med school students and say, hey, you ought to find balance. I don't think they're going to find balance that first year of med school or law school. I don't think anybody's going to find balance at the first 6 weeks of boot camp, entering military, or they're going to find balance on deployments. But I think what's important is to recognize two things. One, a level of harmony. I know Jeff Bezos likes to use that word a lot. I actually like it as well. I think there is a harmonious relationship that we can have with regard to the peaks and valleys of life, that when life throws up off curveballs at us, there will be times when we are immensely focused on a particular area out of necessity and out of a sense of urgency, whether it be because we have to get through the corridor of that certification, whether it because we have to get through that particular project with the deadline. There are periods and seasons where we have to grind and grit it out, right? But it can't be continuous. It can't be extended. And that's where it goes back to this principle of diminishing returns. You have to recognize that you are a human. You cannot go through boot camp 4 times and think that you're going to produce and perform at the same level as you did at the beginning. You cannot do things at a high pace repeatedly, month after month, year after year, without thinking that you're going to experience some level of burnout. And so there are peaks, there are valleys. And it's, again, with this recognition of don't compare, but be self-aware that this may be a season where I've got to put in the grind. I'm a solopreneur. I'm an entrepreneur. I am the CFO, the CEO, the COO, the CMO, the CHRO. I'm wearing like 6 different hats, and you're telling me to find balance? Son, come on. And I would say, you're right. You're in that 6 months, 1 year, 1.5 year period of going full speed, wearing 6 different hats. I get that. But then I won't leave you there. I will say, but you're human, right? There is a scarcity that you're going to deal with. And the universal fact of the matter is you too will experience diminishing returns. And so it's that self-awareness that would say, at what point do you find what are some of the traits and the attributes and the recognizing symptoms of diminishing returns in your life? And can you assess what that might look like? Here's the problem. A lot of people that are in that race, they are very isolated because they're so busy. And that's where I say, If you know you're going to enter a chaotic, busy, high intensity peak season of life, first things first, surround yourself with someone or some group. Don't isolate, because in that isolation, it's really hard to be cognizant of when you are approaching, plateauing, and falling down diminishing returns. It's in the company of others, they can see it first. They can see your attitude changing. They can see your demeanor changing. They can see your tone changing. They can see the bags under your eyes changing. They can see your diet changing, right? And they're the ones that are going to speak into your life about diminishing returns. They might not use that language, but they will say, hey, can you substitute in a little break? Can you substitute in a day off? Can you take a little time away? And so it's really important as you're entering those peak seasons, because we all have them. We will all have them. And I will never be the one to say, hey, no, you ought to have balance in med school. It's just not going to happen. But what's important is are you isolated, or are you surrounding with those who can speak into your life about diminishing returns? And if you think about it, that's not only self-care, that's self-leadership, right? Self-leadership.
Independence leadership. And I don't know. The last time we spoke, I remember there was I can't remember the exact conversation, but economics. This topic that what we're talking about. I would imagine economics can get a bad rap of the word selfish comes to mind, right? And that's not necessarily accurate. You made it clear in the last time we spoke that sure, there is some level of selfishness. That's how we would describe it, but it's not selfish. It's quite the opposite. When we think about using economics, leadernomics for the good of all, right?
Yeah. So, and it kind of segues from what we were just talking about getting away from this mode of isolation, in particular as leaders. I think as leaders, it's very easy to isolate in the midst of busyness and in those peak seasons. But like I always like to say, leadership is a team sport. And the leaders are going to have blind spots all the time. So it's incredibly important to surround yourself with trusted advisors. And it's also incredibly important to recognize a level of human humility, so that you recognize that people need to speak into your life and you need to welcome that and invite that. So those are all, I guess, just general traits of good, sound leadership. But it's in the midst of that, in that recognition of leadership as a team sport, you also recognize that as you go, everything that you do in the way of decisions and actions, it has a spillover effect on that team. It has a spillover effect on others. And so it's not just about your individual welfare, it's about the social welfare that surrounds you and your decisions. And so that's where it gets back to economics will get a bad rap when you start talking about words like self-interested behavior or selfish behavior, or as Gordon Gekko from the famous movie Wall Street said, greed is good, right? And all of a sudden people walk away with this notion of economics is all about maximizing profit, maximizing revenue, maximizing my pocketbook. Greed is good. And what I like to say is that the essence of economics in its human endeavor is it's maximizing social welfare. That's the heart and the foundation of economics, not only in the marketplace, but in the community, in the home, in relationships. How does one maximize social welfare? So if your self-interested decision making is solely in isolation, then that can be quite selfish. But if you understand the heart of economics, it's how do I maximize social welfare? And so that doesn't mean just me in isolation. That means all of those that are influenced, impacted, and are going to be recipients of the decisions and the choices that I make, the spillover effect on others. And that's how maximizing social welfare guides the foundational economic thinking and how I make decisions. So is it self-interested? Yes. It's self-interested for the sake of maximizing social welfare. And when I maximize social welfare, well, I am also one of the top beneficiaries of that maximizing of social welfare. So it's actually for my good, my benefit.
And actually, I think this is maybe a good segue where we can talk a little bit, if you want, talk a little bit about this experience of going into these bookstores. I could argue, I think, that this is choosing to buy a book at a bookstore is a self-interest, or can be a self-interest, right? Not everybody wants that bookstore to be there, but I do. It's in my interest to make sure that that business owner survives. It's a communal good, but I'm not doing it out of pure generosity where I'm just donating money to a bookstore to help them stay in business, right? That's maybe one way of looking at it, but I think what you're saying is no, where the self-interest comes into play is I want this bookstore to exist. Therefore, I am going to support it. I am making this conscious decision to spend my money here and not online. And therefore, it may not serve everybody, but it's serving my needs. And it just so happens to also serve that business owner and all that others and everybody else who's impacted.
Yeah, so like bookstores are a very interesting entity. I like to call it one of the last great community institutions that still exist, other than perhaps the library. But the library is subsidized oftentimes by both city and state level governments. But the bookstore is not subsidized, right? And yet the bookstore provides this social welfare. It provides this spillover into their community, right? Of the arts, of creativity, of literature, of conversations, of communal gatherings, right? It's not just about the book transaction. It's not just about me walking in, buying a book and walking out. If that's all it was about, then hey, Amazon.com. I get it. Faster, cheaper, why not? But if I begin to understand the inherent value that that bookstore provides not only to me but to the community, then is it worth perhaps the added markup above the Amazon price so that that place that has this positive spillover onto others in the community, that it will survive and that it will be sustained? And so, I was telling you earlier, Miguel, I found it so fascinating that these bookstores that I visited, 19 in the 12 days that I did, and all of their amazing stories, there was a constant theme that came across. The ones that are surviving, and not only surviving, but thriving in many ways. And when I say thriving, it's pretty amazing that a local brick and mortar store would be around for 100 years. Through all of the ups and downs since the Great Depression to now, it's still here. Or that a brick and mortar bookstore, right, though it's not making a ton, the community continues to filter in. So there is this understanding, the synergy between community, bookseller, and bookstore, that there's a lot more being provided than just the transaction. And what ends up happening is that this private business, though not supported by the government, it's almost being subsidized by its community in that they will pay the retail price to ensure that all of the goodness, all of the positive spillovers that that bookstore provides by being in that community, that it survives, that it sticks around. And so it's this synergy, this relationship that actually has made these bookstores, in my opinion, not only survivable, but I think we're going to see a significant growth in independent local bookstores. If I could go back to your point also before the bookstores with regard to this selfish nature getting a bad rap, if you wanted to break down an economy to its, what I would consider its most basic relationship, I would say it's marriage. You have this economy between a husband and a wife, a spouse and a spouse, and you ask yourself, can you be selfish in the best way? And I would say, yes, you can. Because if I am going to be truly selfish in my marriage, I want to be as selfless to my spouse as possible. Because if they are miserable, I will be miserable. But if they are supported, if they are well rested, if they're cared for, right? If they are encouraged, then all of that goodness comes back to me in the way of this economy called spouse and spouse. And so you can call it selfish. I like to call it the most hedonistic behavior you can have in an economy. If you want to really serve yourself in that economy, serve your spouse. And you will see that the social welfare of that relationship is dynamic, and it will grow, and it will benefit you in ways that could never benefit you outside of that social welfare.
It's getting past just pulling this up. It reminds me of this book I'm actually reading. It's called Us by Terrence Real. And he talks about shifting away from the individual to the us, right? I have my own individual needs, and why can't I have this in the relationship? And why can't I have that? And, he or she's whatever label, and we view them in this negative way, as opposed to thinking about the us. And it's kind of exactly what you're talking about, is in order for me to get what I want, I kind of have to give her or him what she wants or what they want, right, in this relationship. So it's stepping so and it's kind of in the same thing that you were talking about with this theme of selfishness or doing things in our self-interest. And there's this misconception in the way we think about that. Yes, I am self-interested in myself and being happy in this marriage. And so I'm choosing to put us before myself. And so the decisions, the way I respond, the way I react in this relationship is for the benefit of us, for the benefit of me almost. But
Yeah.
so it's almost like Leadernomics is the way I'm kind of thinking about this is it's much more than just the tool bag. I think is a great reference. The way I'm thinking about it is it's a constant mindset of deep and thorough awareness of all things, right? It's not just being aware of what I want, but it's being aware of the consequences of what I want. It's being aware of the goodness or the bad, or the cause and effect, right? All of those things, the scarcity that you talked about, and you adopting all these different principles. But it all kind of comes back to, and the word I think about is awareness. It's having this awareness at a constant time. And is that what you would what you would say makes a good leader? I mean, what makes a good leader in your
So, first of all, I would say that everyone, leadership is simply influence. That if you are in a place where you don't even recognize it because you think you're doing things on your own, I mean, unless you're a complete hermit, you're generally in the context of others in one way or the other. And so, in that context, whatever it is that you do, you have some level of spillover effect on others. And so when you do things, when you decide things, when you think things, when you speak things, there is some level of influential spillover that you have. So everybody has some level of leadership capacity. They're leading, influencing others through their actions, through their thoughts, and through their decisions. And when I think about economics and leadernomics, it's to understand that instead of having all of these micro decisions throughout the day and pulling back into your list of tools to figure out what to do, wouldn't it be nice to have a framework, to have a mentor in 365 that kind of gives you this POV? And it's this POV that says, I'm not going to take you from here to here. In fact, the discipline of economics is to take you not from good to better. It's actually a discipline that's here to take you from better to better to better to best. That's why economics is interesting to me. It uses words like optimal, maximum, greatest, right? It doesn't settle for anything less. And so in the framework of leadership, influence, relationships, I want the best outcomes. I want the greatest outcomes. And I want leaders to have a framework that can take them from not just good to better, but a framework that's always going to challenge them to strive for what would be the best decision for that scenario, for that situation, for that outcome. That's where I want to take them. That's where economics wants to take them. And here's the thing, Miguel. People can watch this, listen to me, and say, well, Seung, that's your opinion of economics, and that's your opinion of leadership. And that's where I like to come back and say, I didn't create economics. Economics was around long before me, and it's universal in its principles. So you don't have to listen to me, but economics isn't going anywhere. It's a foundational, principle-driven, universal truth.
It's
The
taking
only
effect
question,
whether we want it or not.
exactly. And so I've often said that when I have followed the advice of this mentor, it has never let me down. But I don't always trust it. I don't always follow it. And I've been asked repeatedly, Seung, who did you write that book for? Who's your target audience? And if I'm honest, I always say, I wrote it for me because I need Leadernomics every single day, every single moment of every single day This guy fails. I flop. I know the principle, but do I always follow it? No. Do I always trust it? No. And when I haven't, it leads me down some weird paths and some very destructive patterns. Do I sense diminishing returns on time every single time? No way. Do I always follow team leadership? Of course not. And so this guy, probably more than anyone I know, I'm always struggling with diminishing returns. I'm always struggling with sunk cost. I'm constantly failing to see the opportunity cost, the sacrifice, and the value in other people. I am constantly overlooking positive externalities and not subsidizing the bookstore when I should. I'm that guy that's in the bookstore looking at Amazon.com and seeing if I can get a better deal somewhere else. I'm that guy. And so who did I write the book for? First and foremost, this economist this leader wrote that book for me because I need it. And so that's such an important aspect. I hope for any thought leader, any writer, I hope they first wrote the book for themselves because they realize how much they need it. And I haven't mastered any of it, right? I like to call I had a publisher who jokingly, but actually quite seriously said, the subtitle of your book should be Leadernomics, Lessons from a Failed Economist, because that's the truth. It is a guy who has seen repeatedly economics is not the failure. Economics has been right every single time, but I don't follow it oftentimes. And so I need to be reminded of it a lot. And I need to remember that this framework exists. I need to stop comparing. I need to be self-aware.
Yeah.
I need to bury the sunk cost. I need to remember this economy between my wife and I, and that when I support her during her diminishing returns, it benefits our social welfare. I need to be reminded of this stuff all the time.
In a way, it almost kind of sounds like the same way somebody would describe their faith to a higher being, and we don't need to get into whether you have faith or anything like that, but I find that interesting that there's a similarity in terms of the way you describe it. It exists whether we see it or not. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's happening. It's never going to fail. You might fail because you didn't follow these principles, commandments, whatever they are, right? I'm almost, I don't want to derail the conversation, but I'm almost wondering why there's such a striking similarity between the two.
So you, young man, are a very insightful soul because Miguel, we haven't had a faith conversation yet. We haven't had a faith discussion, but there's a reason why I entitled the book Life and Leadership Lessons from My Mentor, almost giving this discipline, this study, an enlivened personality, calling it a mentor, right? And I did that intentionally because, quite honestly, the mentor is a metaphor. And it's a metaphor. Some might say it's a metaphor for truth. It's a metaphor for me personally. It's a metaphor for God, right? God created economics. I didn't create economics. Humans didn't create economics. Somebody created economics. The principles are there. And what's interesting to me is that I encountered economics before I encountered God. And if I may, I'm going to get into a little bit of a faith discussion. But in my earlier comments to you, where as I was going through this crisis in life, and then I was in this class, and as principles were being unfolded, if you recall, I said it was almost like looking in a mirror. Like, how did this discipline put up this mirror and say, "Oh, Seung, here are your motives. Here are your intentions. Here's what you say, but here's really your priorities. Here's really your preferences," right? And I just found it astounding that how is this lifeless discipline acting as this enlivened, soul-searching, heart-wrenching mirror to me? Well, fast forward about 4, 5, 6 years, and I finally got to a place where I was doing a little bit of extra soul-searching just about life and about death and about purpose. And I started opening. My aunt, who is a Christian, she used to send me as a Christmas gift, she used to send me a Bible every year. So like when I opened the bottom drawer, I think I had like 10 Bibles from my aunt. And so one day I finally decided, okay, does the Bible have anything to say to me about, life and death, about integrity, about faith, things of purpose? And as I started going through the scriptures, well, guess what I started discovering? I started discovering economics all over again. I started seeing all the principles that I saw as a college freshman, but it was now in this book that was far older than this textbook. And it was the same principles, Bible verse by Bible verse, teaching by teaching. And I just thought, well, would you look at that? And so, in fact, over the course of my life, the Bible has kind of been that mirror now, right back to my soul, the way kind of economics has been. And so, yeah, so it's been this journey of seeing first economics, but I truly believe in many ways that economics actually ended up kind of being this guide toward me in my faith journey almost simultaneously. And then when I wrote this book, and I've been speaking on it for a long, long time, and every time I speak about it, Miguel, invariably a handful of people will come up to me after I speak, and they will say, "Are are you a person of faith?" And I'll
Yeah.
say, "Well, what makes you say that?" And they say, "Well, because this whole economics thing, it's getting into areas of investing pricelessly. It's getting into areas of investing eternally. You're getting into areas of leading based on inherent worth, not market worth. And these are deep things, Sung." And I say, "Ask me more. Let's talk." Right. And yeah, it's basically a metaphor for what I would consider the greatest mentor in life, right?
Mm,
The one who created economics.
mm,
And so, yes, it's very much integrated with my faith. It's very much integrated with what I believe to be true. And that's why the principles, as I said earlier, that's why it's never failed me.
mm,
If it fails, it's because I didn't listen to it. It's not because principles are wrong. And that's why it's not one of those, well, let's see, which leadership essential should I pluck out today and which leadership essential should I put away today? It doesn't work like that. It's a paradigm. It's a way of thinking about life and leadership. And once you put on Leadernomics, you can't take it off. You can't pick and choose. You can follow it or fail it, but it's whole, it's holistic. And that's why I love it. And that's why I trust it. It's a matter of trust. And leadership is a matter of trust. If I do X, will they respond with Y? There is no absolute formula for that when you're
mm,
talking about leadership and relationships between leaders and followers. There is a risk. There is a measure of trust that if I follow this principle, I am going to trust that the principle will follow its way out. Maybe not immediately. Maybe there's a massive delay. Maybe the gratification is years down the road, but there is a trust that the leader must have in how they follow Leadernomics, right?
mm.
Principle is true.
Wow. Wow, that's super deep. I have two more questions for you. You wrote this book for yourself, and that makes a lot of sense now. But what change in an individual, a person, or in a community, or the world would you hope to see with this book beyond writing it for yourself? What is something that you hope that this book sparks, either in a person, a community, or the world?
Man, I wrote it for me. I wrote it for my kids because I want my kids to they know Leadernomics because they've been hearing it since birth. So trust me, whenever I fail Leadernomics, I've got 3 kids that will call me out immediately, Dad. And I've got a wife that knows Leadernomics and she'll call me out as well. And I should say that for anybody that's interested in learning more about Leadernomics, be careful because the minute you do, and the minute you talk about it with others, and the minute other people on your team understand Leadernomics, you will invariably encounter a level of accountability that you will probably not have experienced before because they will spit the principles right back to you, right? It's very evident in that way. So in part, I wrote it for me. I wrote it for my kids. I wrote it for my family. I wrote it for my kids' kids one day so that they have something to pass on to them. But at a humorous level, at a very comical level, Miguel, I don't want another single person to ever fall asleep in economics. I don't want another college student to ever walk away thinking that economics was simply about supply and demand. I don't want them ever thinking that it was simply about how can I get more money in my pockets? Because more money in your pockets is truly not maximizing social welfare. It's not, right? I don't want a single person walking away thinking that economics is simply about GDP and about global geopolitical issues. It's far more. You know what it's about? It's about the human endeavor. And so, yeah, call me crazy. Do I want to see it get out to the world? Well, if you're a human being, yeah, I'd love for you to get a hold of Leadernomics because it ought to change your perspective of what economics was always intended to be, which is to give you a framework for not just good decision making, but the best decision making, the most maximizing,
Yeah.
optimal social welfare decision making, which will then return back to you in the way of welfare. It just does. That's how it works. And so, yeah, I want to preach it from the rooftops. I'm getting a little bit later in my life. And so my energy level has diminished, right? I'm experiencing diminishing returns. But yet, when I talk about this, you can call me a Leadernomics evangelist. I truly believe it will change the way you lead yourself first.
Mhm.
It will change the way you lead your marriage. It will change the way you lead your family and your kids. It will help you to not be a control freak. It will help you to delegate, not dump. It will help you to take the small steps in life that you need to. People are out there, millions of copies of Atomic Habits have sold. Let me tell you, Atomic Habits is addressed in chapter 3. Chapter 3 covers the entirety of the principle of atomic habits. It's right in there, right?
I would imagine that
Why?
it also gives you it teaches you how to take accountability for yourself.
Absolutely. Right. It's leadership starts with self leadership. Care for others starts with self care. Right. And so it's all in there with economics. You cannot maximize social welfare if you're depleted. You can't do it. Right. And so I like to tell people, like, I love that book, Atomic Habits, but recognize that is one chapter in this framework of Leadernomics. It's all there. And so I want people to see that you need this framework. It will guide you. The only question is, will you trust it? Will you follow through? And if you do, it will change you. It will change your marriage. It will change your family. It will change your company. It will change your culture. And it will affect how you are influencing your community. It will.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So the last question I have for you is it's a question I ask everybody who's on this interview series, and that is, well, the name of this interview series is Life First Conversations. You mentioned it a couple times as in our conversation today. For you, Song, what does life first mean to you? What comes to mind?
Doing the things that give life and putting away the things that deplete life in many ways. And it's a journey. I don't think it's something that we discover instantaneously at a point in time. I think it's a journey of discovering the things that enliven your soul, enliven your intellect, enliven your character. All of the things that I think give us breath in life, culture, arts, those are the things that I want to embrace. And then the things that kind of deplete from life, that drain from life, I would love to see it more and more gradually just kind of dissipate away, right? Life first. There's a thing that we used to say in the military, and and I'm going to share this little story because it was very impactful for me, although it wasn't so impactful for a lot of others. And I wonder why. There was a time, Miguel, in the military where we had this mantra. And the mantra was people first, mission always. People first, mission always. And then I can't remember exactly when, but it was a couple of years before I retired. The military decided to change the mantra and flip it. And they flipped it to mission first, people always. And I remember seeing that recommended change becoming an institutionalized change. And people were like, oh, it's just semantics. And I sat back and I thought, well, why is this? This is not settling well in my heart at all. It's not settling well at all. And I talked to a couple people about it and they're like, oh, Sung, come on, it's not a big deal. Just, people first, mission always, mission first, people always, come on. Yeah. And I thought, I think this is going to create a major cultural change. And the reason why I felt that way is because there's something with the word first. The word first matters, and the word always also matters. And I kind of like to break it down to this notion. If you are for everything, then you kind of are for nothing. And that's where this notion of always kind of comes into place. If it's always, then is it always urgent or is it always not urgent? What is it? It's got this vagueness to it, always, because it's always. But first has a very definitive message, right? And so when they changed it from people first to mission first, it's going to change culture to see and perceive mission first. And that other thing called always will always be there, right? People.
Replaceable.
Replaceable. Maybe sometimes they're important, maybe sometimes they're not, but mission is always first, right? First. So, yet at the same time, you would hear every military leader say this: take care of your people, and your people will take care of your mission.
Well,
Well,
that's because you're
interesting.
talking about the
So
old
here
culture.
you are. Yeah, so you're kind of speaking out of both minds. You're kind of saying mission first, people always, but take care of your people, and your people will take care of your mission. So that second statement, you're putting people first. Take care of your people, and your people will take care of the mission. So that little change meant the world to me. Well, the same thing. Life first. I love the title of Life First. Don't ever change it to Life Always, because life always is just always. But life first means something. It means, one, what matters to you in life. Your title actually conveys you have scarcity. So what is the most important things in your life? And then it challenges you with the notion of, is it first? Is it first? Is it preeminent? Is it priority? Will it be something that you might have peaks and valleys, but it will never be put away in the closet? It will always have its place at the top of the rung, right? So that to me is incredibly important to say life first. And so what are the things in life that give you life? Health gives you life for your body. Faith gives you life for your soul. Books, literature, arts, they give you life for the culture and for the community. Relationships give you life socially. And so the things that give you life, make it first. Know what they are, right? That's really important for me. And I think and I'm so impressed by you because, man, I love the fact that you're young. I know you're young because you got young kids, and for you to have prioritized this thing called life first, it just gives me a lot of joy for not only you and your family and your generation. I've seen a number of your podcasts and your podcast guests, and I think you've gotten some amazing guests on your show who are in their own industry and in their own way. I just love how they're conveying this message of life first. So if there's going to be wealth, because I like wealth, but may it be life first, wealth always.
There you go. I love that. Life first, wealth always. Song, this has been incredible. Let's talk about, end with your book real quick. Where can somebody, now you've convinced, I mean, I already have your book, but you've convinced people they really need to read this. They can have this framework, they can have this mentor. Beyond Amazon, where else can they find this book?
So it's at Barnes. It's also on a site called bookshop.org. Barnes, Amazon, and then I've got my own website where if they wanted a signed copy, they can get it from leadernomics.org, O-R-G, not com. It's leadernomics.org. And yeah, Miguel, this has been my pleasure. I am so thankful for this conversation. And, some people might say, why is this military econ guy with this book called Leadernomics coming on a show called Life First? Because if you think about it, right, the book is really about life first. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. Thanks for everybody who watched the video. This is live. As soon as I hit end, you can rewatch this, share it. And Seung, I wish you a continued good health, prosperity, and I know we'll stay in touch as friends.
Awesome. Thanks, Miguel.
Thank you.